So, about 5 years ago, I moved back to New Jersey to take care of my mom because she got sick. And obviously, when a parent gets cancer, that's always sad, unless it's a hilarious cancer. And I checked, and there are none. And that's tough, because there's butt and ball cancer. Like, one of them should be hilarious. And they're not. So I moved back to Jersey. And it's weird, like, when your personal life is falling apart, like, normal life just, like, keeps on moving. And I was back taking care of my mom, and I got an audition in New York for a sitcom. And I was like, oh, I guess I gotta go do this audition, So I go up to the city, and I prep the scene. And the scene had kind of an emotional moment to it. I was like, oh, this will be interesting to play. And I get in the room with the casting person, and I'm doing the scene. And as I'm doing it, I'm like, I'm feeling it, I'm like, oh, I think I'm doing a pretty good job. And then all of a sudden, I feel at the emotional moment in the scene like a tear roll down my face. And I'm like, am I fucking crying in an audition? I'm nailing this! And I was like, am I Al Pacino and I didn't know it? And I finished the scene, and I wipe the tears away. And I look at the casting person, and the casting person just goes, oh, so sad! I swear to God, it was like I auditioned for the cartoon version of a 12-year-old bully, And I told my friend that story, and he's like, oh, man, I got to take you out. You got to get your mind off this. And so he brought me out. He was playing with one of my favorite bands, Dinosaur Jr., and I love Dinosaur Jr. so much. And so we got to go backstage to the green room at this rock show, And the green room of a rock show is a very small, intimate party, And I'm very uncomfortable at small, intimate parties. I prefer the anonymity of a large party, which is a paraphrase from The Great Gatsby. So this is going to be a little bit pretentious. But also, I was very nervous because I wasn't supposed to be there. I'm not on the show. I'm just there. And it's just filled with, 90s rock legends. I was just like, well, I have to explain to people why I'm here. I didn't at all. And, Henry Rollins was there, and I, marched up to Henry Rollins, and I was like, hi, Henry, I'm Kurt. I'm a comedian. He was like, you're very intense. And I was just like, I gotta get out! And I, ran into Tony Hawk, and I was just like, comedian! And, ran away. And then Mike Watt was in this room, and Mike Watt was in this band, the Minutemen, and I love the Minutemen, and I was just so nervous, I was just so nervous to be in the same room with him that I was like, I gotta get out of here. And I went down to watch the show. But when you're backstage at a rock show, it's open bar. And I am very good / very bad at open bars, depending on your opinion of things. So I'll tell you a story to explain. When I was 8 years old, we were out of the house for about 9 hours, and my cat knocked a 5-pound bag of powdered sugar onto the ground, and then my 10-pound poodle, Doogie Bowser, K9, proceeded to eat all 5 pounds of powdered sugar. And I can only imagine his day. Where manna falls from the heavens, he gets into it, it goes down easy, it's powdered sugar. But after a pound and a half, I'm sure he was like, hoo, I'm not feeling too good. But something in his little doggy mind was like, but when is this gonna happen again? Let's get back in there. Let's finish all 5 pounds of powdered sugar. He did. He was sick for 3 days. He shit and puked all the time. That is exactly how I am at an open bar. So I'm putting a few back. I'm watching the show. And for 10 minutes, It's perfect. I'm watching Dinosaur Jr., and I'm fully present. And everything that's going on with my life falls away. I'm not thinking about the fact that my mom is sick. I'm just here. And then a phone goes up in front of my face. And I'm an old man. I hate phones at shows. I don't mind a quick pic, but he was just like, this guy was like, I'm just going to shoot 15 minutes of this. And it was just right in front of me. And this is at a Dinosaur Jr. show where everyone is over 40 with their arms crossed like, this is the way Fugazi taught us to watch rock music. And so it's like very apparent that this guy is like just the only one with a phone. And I'm like, I should say something to this guy, you know? And then I'm like, my mom would say something to this guy. And I'm like, oh, great, now I have to go down that hole. Then I'm about to say something to him, and he puts it down. And I'm like, whew, crisis averted, thank goodness. And I go back to enjoying the show. And then Mike Watt comes out on stage with Dinosaur Jr., and I'm like, I don't know if this has ever happened before. This is a historical moment. And then that fucking phone goes up again. And I was like, not on my watch! And I reached out, and I shoved the hand down, and then everything went into slow motion. And I was like, oh, that hand feels tinier than it should. And then a woman turned. It was a brand new person who had never done it before. That other guy had left. And she looked at me with rage in her eyes. And she pointed at the stage where Mike Watt was, and she said, that's my husband up there. And I just went, like the camera of my life just immediately like reversed on me. I was no longer like some phone justice warrior, like protecting my mom's honor. I was a big drunk bully, like shoving a proud wife's hand down. And I was just like, no! And I just deflated completely inside myself until I was just the tip of my own penis. And that fell to the ground and then rolled out the door like a little green pea, which I do believe is a book by the fuck pirate Shel Silverstein. And I just left, and I went into the bathroom, and I like locked myself in a stall, and I started to have a full-on panic attack. Like I felt so bad about this. Like I started hyperventilating, and I was like, I have to fix this. I have to fix this. And now, looking back on it, I know what was happening. My mom was dying, and I had all of these emotions that I had never dealt with before coming up, but now I was placing them on this poor woman whose hand I shoved down momentarily, and like I couldn't do anything about the fact that my mom was dying, but I could fix this in my mind. And so I was like, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make this right. I'm gonna make this right. So I run in and I place myself in this like dark hallway that I know she has to walk through in order to get to the green room. Guys, hot tip, don't wait for women you don't know in a dark hallway. Not a good look. She comes in, and I immediately start apologizing. I'm like, I'm so sorry, you don't understand. Like, there was a guy before you, and she is so cool about it. She is like, hey, no, I get it. I hate phones at shows too. And because she's being cool about it, I just start bawl crying. And I was like, but I'm still apologizing? Like, no, I'm apologizing to you. And she's like, what is going on? And then her husband comes off stage, and her husband is not Mike Watt. He's just some fucking saxophonist. And you guys know how I feel about the fucking saxophone. The saxophone is the limp dick of the woodwinds. It even looks like you cut a limp dick off and dipped it in brass. That's what it looks like. That's what it sounds like if you tried to blow through a limp dick that's been cut off a body, like. And saxophones don't belong in rock and roll unless it's Bruce Springsteen or Rocket from the Crypt, and fuck saxophones! And so now I'm still crying and apologizing, but also like, saxophone! And I pause for a moment, and I see in their eyes that they are terrified of me. And I realize it all at once, and then out loud I just go, abort! And I turn around, and I run away. I run out of the venue, and I run into Chinatown in New York City. I run into a park, and I sit on a bench, and I just start crying. I've never in my entire life cried this hard for this long. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but it's one of those cries where like you're crying for so long that you use up all of the emotion, but then you're still locked into like the physical act of crying, and your mind starts to wander, where you're just like, I wonder if it'll be nice out tomorrow. And then I got an idea for a joke. And I was like, that's a good bit. I like took a note of it in my phone, and I poured myself into a cab and I went home. I woke up the next morning and I was with my mom, and my mom was like, hey, how'd it go last night? And I didn't want to tell her like, oh, well, I shoved a proud wife's hand down and embarrassed myself in front of all of my rock idols. Instead, I was like, what did I do? I was like, well, I wrote a joke last night. And she was like, tell it to me. And then I was like, okay. And then I was like, oh, unconscious, please let this be good. So I didn't really remember it. Took out my phone. And this was the joke I read to my dying mother. When you're crying, your glasses are like tiny aquariums that are terrible at their job. And you have never seen a woman fake laugh harder than my mom fake laughed at that joke. And I realized what I wanted to happen in that moment. What I wanted to happen is I wanted comedy. This thing that I've dedicated my entire life to. I wanted to gather up all that sadness and like transform it into this like nugget of pure joy. And instead I got this like nugget of mild chuckles, which is so much worse, Like there's no way my mom liked that joke, actually. You can't, it's a bad joke, It's like overly cutesy, kind of doesn't make sense. It's all of my flaws as a stand-up, really, I essentially wrote the saxophone of a joke. But she laughed. She laughed. Because it's not about the joke. It's about who's telling it to you. And now that I have 2 kids, I get that. We found out that my wife was pregnant the day after my mom's funeral. And so I've been trying to be a parent without the parent that raised me. And even I always try asking my dad, but he's kind of hazy on which of his 18 grandchildren I'm talking about. But I'm trying, And recently, my daughter came to me, and she said, hey, Papa, do you want to hear my joke? And I said, yeah, I want to hear your joke, baby. And she said, why is 6 afraid of 7? And I said, why? She said, 'cause 7, 8, 9 are gonna eat him. And at first I was gonna correct her, Like, that's not how the joke goes. Also, it's kind of weird to be stealing material so early. But I realized, like, it's a better joke that way. Like, her joke is perfectly stupid. And as a comedian, that's what I try and do all the time. I try and make things perfectly stupid. And my daughter just knocked it out of the park on her first try. And so I laughed. I laughed so hard because I love my daughter's dumb joke the same way my mom loved my dumb joke. Because it's not about the joke. It's about who's telling it to you. And I want my daughter to live in a world full of silliness and absurdity for as long as she possibly can. And that is one thing that comedy can do. It can make things perfectly stupid.